Hey, I think we'll get started. Looks like a small group tonight, which is just fine. Um, Feel free to keep your cameras off if that feels more comfortable. I'm going to keep my camera on, and hopefully, what you're seeing in front of you is just the main slide, which says City of Guelph Artist in Residence Program 2025. I have I'm going to introduce myself. I have a few slides to share just to kind of ground us in um, the sort of ins and outs of the programs as it's been published. And then what I'd like to do is have as much time together as possible to answer questions that you may have, so I can sort of demystify the process a little bit and hopefully answer questions that maybe I haven't thought of, but you're thinking of as you're preparing your applications. And I am recording, as you saw when you logged on, hopefully. And the intention there is to share the recording publicly after this presentation. And so that some folks have registered to join us tonight who may or may not be able to attend. So I want to make sure that they get some information that they were hoping to collect. And then yeah, you can let me know if there's any points in the discussion where you would be uncomfortable with the record or that aspect of the recording being shared, and I can make note and just modify that part of the recording itself. So I think I'll just get started. Of course, we're gathered tonight to talk about the City of Guelph Artist in Residence Program 2025. My name is Dawn Owen. I'm the Curator, Museums and Culture at the City of Guelph. Under that umbrella, under that title, it's my pleasure to have responsibilities that focus on the growth and development of the public art collection, the annual hosting of the Artist in Residence program, and to work with our culture team more broadly on sort of creating opportunities within the culture community, opportunities for artists of all disciplines to have, serious professional opportunities in the City of Guelph. And of course, we hope that you consider the Artist in Residence program one of those serious opportunities. I'll just advance the slide. I'm telling it to advance, and it is lovely. Okay, so before we get into the discussion of the residency, I'd like to share a few words of land relationship. So as we gather, let us take time to reflect on our privilege to work and live in Guelph, a city built over rich Indigenous histories. We are guests here, and we should reflect upon the responsibility to care for this land, the people who live here today, and the generations to come. If our actions today can move us towards reconciliation, we should take pause and make those decisions with intention and gratitude. This place we call Guelph has served as traditional lands and a place of refuge for many peoples over time, but more specifically, the Attawandaron and the Haudenosaunee. This land is held as a treaty lands and territory with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Guelph lies directly adjacent to the Haldimand Tract and is part of a long-established traditional hunting ground for the Six Nations of the Grand River. And many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples who have come from across Turtle Island call Guelph home today. So the agenda for our meeting tonight is this. You can see it on your screen. We're going to do an overview of the program, including goals, scope of work, eligibility, and timeline, selection process, phases 1 and 2 of the evaluation criteria, and then tips and tricks for this initial phase of the application, followed by a Q&A. And I should encourage you, if you have questions as I'm going along, feel free, we're a small group, just to jump right in to either the chat, or you can let me know on your screen if you want to interject, but I'm very comfortable with just sort of rolling with it. And don't want you to not have a question answered if you've got something that you're thinking about and would like to discuss sort of midway through. So the program is an incubator. We see it as an incubator for artistic creation, inspiration, and community connections. The program invites artists to consider how community might witness, contribute to, engage with, and/or participate in their art. The residency prioritizes projects that creatively and accessibly animate public spaces. We're interested in all mediums and modes of expression. some of which may be literary, media, performance, and or visual arts. And in 2025, we are awarding one project that is worth $10,000. So the program goals are multiple. We aim to increase opportunities for artists while building the city's reputation through arts and culture, to creatively animate public spaces, both indoor and outdoor, or one or the other. If you prefer to work indoor, that's fine, and outdoor opportunities are great too. Provide opportunities for artists to engage with the public through creative practices. We're keen to amplify underrepresented voices to advance equity, diversity, and inclusion in the arts. We're really keen to nurture the community's broad interest in the arts and to encourage their engagement as well. Cultivate connections with artists and residents, the public, and their shared communities. And share stories that reflect the place currently known as Guelph and the diverse experiences that we have that have lived, live, and or grow here. So the scope of the work, the residency period is July 1st to October 12th, 2025. It's important to note that this is not a live-in residency. So artists, they don't necessarily have to live in Guelph, they themselves, but have a connection to Guelph, and would be expected to be active and animating Guelph spaces, but it's not a live-in residency. So that means it doesn't come with sort of like opportunity, a living space or opportunity to stay in the city is not built in for an extended period. It's not built into the residency itself. Artists are encouraged to create new work, to advance work in progress, and to reimagine past work. Artists should consider the community's various ways of experiencing art. And so we think about that very broadly, just how humans engage the world around them and sort of what are the different ways that folks from a huge range of diverse lived experiences and knowledges might experience the art that you're creating. The residency will contribute sort of in its culmination to Culture Days, which takes place between September 19th and October 12th of 2025, in a way that can both share and celebrate with the public. So there are some suggestions at the bottom of the slide there: installation, performance or event work, exhibition, workshop, self-guided public activity, an artist talk, community-centered experience. This is not an exhaustive list. You very likely have other ideas of how to connect with community in that Culture Days period, and we're really curious to see what those may hold. I do want to take a moment and just talk about the concept of reimagining or reworking something you may have started or created in the past. We recognize that artists are constantly producing, that the work that you do isn't created in most cases linearly, that it's a non-linear journey that you might revisit quite often. Some artists revisit work that they've started or that has been completed in past, but they have a different or evolving relationship with. All of that is considered interesting and a completely viable project opportunity within the residency. If you can also use the residency as sort of an incubator for an idea, so it might be a first phase or a phase one of a project that you're visioning. And that's interesting to us as well, because, we recognize, although this is a serious creative opportunity, it is limited. It's limited by time. It's limited by budget. So we want to know, what are you visioning? If your vision is much larger than what the capacity of the residency can hold, but you think the residency could meet objectives that are sort of tied into a phase one or a first phase of development of the work, we're completely interested in that approach as well. Okay, so I just want to share a little bit about eligibility. So it is open to all artists and art collectives. So collectives to us are two or more people working as a creative group or an artist group, or who have chosen to collaborate for this program. So you don't have to be a formal capital C collective, I would suggest. What we're interested in is, are you an independent artist sort of working singularly in your practice, or are you going to engage other artists, other creatives to create the work that will happen within the residency? Both of those iterations are interesting to us. The project budget can be used towards all costs associated with the creation and implementation of the residency. Artists and artist collectives are encouraged to express their unique and intersectional identities in the description of their practices. And artists are encouraged to share how their lived experiences inform their art and their residency proposal. So some of the budget can stretch, also can, excuse me, stretch to include research development and administration, as well as production fees, so materials, studio expenses, services, and equipment. I do want to say we are keen to see in your budgets that you are paying yourself. Oftentimes, what we see with residency proposals is that the artist will think about their materials or their, what are the hard needs that they have for developing their projects. They'll also think about spaces and others that they're collaborating with, and they tend to think about themselves sort of last. And we really want to encourage you to look at the budget and ensure that you are also compensating yourself for your labor that you're creating in the project. If you have questions about that or you want help sort of interpreting what that means, you can also reach out to me directly and we can just have a one-to-one conversation as well. So don't forget to pay yourself is what I'm saying. There's a couple of ineligible elements. So if you've previously received a City of Guelph Artist in Residency residence award, then you are not eligible to apply again. If you're a City of Guelph employee, you're also not eligible. Or if you're thinking of proposing a fundraising activity, that is also not eligible. But that is it. Those three things are the only sort of barriers to access for this program. And if you think you're on the cusp of one of those descriptions, again, reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have and to try and find if there's some gray area there. We definitely we are leaning more towards accessibility and away from barriers. So just encourage you to reach out to me directly. So the program timeline is phase one of the applications. So the information session is today, January 29th. First phase is due February 12th. Phase two application information session will be a one-to-one, and that'll be with the shortlisted artists. And then that's taking place March 17th. April 2nd is phase two deadline for applications. That's for the shortlisted artists specifically. And then after that, the project gets awarded. There's some business that we have to deal with sort of in that moment, just in terms of contracts and such. And then the residency proper would start round about July 1st to October 12th. Okay, the selection process. Artists are selected through a two-phase process. The first is a calls for expressions of interest, so that's phase one, and then a request for proposals from shortlisted candidates. All applications will be reviewed by the city's Public Art Advisory Committee, and the committee is made up of citizens of Guelph. They are not staff who work towards advancing the public art scene in the community. We are intending to shortlist 4 applications, and then we will award one as in the final residency. So just a note, PAC members, so the Public Art Advisory Committee members, short form PAC, will receive all the materials that you submit. They'll use a scorecard to evaluate each of the submissions. They will evaluate the applications based on set criteria, which are published actually in the call. So I just want you to, as you're developing your proposal, looking at the language of the call will be really important. Each applicant will be scored based on these criteria and then weighted accordingly, excuse me. You can see on the screen there that my information is there if you want to reach me directly. So my phone number, also the culture@guelph.ca email. There's also an accessibility line. If you need a specific accommodation, I'd like to be able to support that. And I will have this information up on, I think, the last slide that we have as well. I'll just advance that here. So phase one application consists of an expression of interest, 500 words max, a proposal that describes the project concept, desired outcomes, and a vision for how the artist will facilitate community engagement. We'd like to see your CV or resume up to 3 pages. We're really encouraging artists to tailor their resumes to the residency program. So if you have particular aspects of the work that you've done in past, or how you've collaborated in past, or worked in public spaces in past, we definitely want to see that in your resume. We're interested in your education. We're interested in all the things that you deem are important to just, sharing who you are and what your experience are professionally. Um, but sometimes what we get is more of, say, for example, like an academic resume, or we might get one that is, a professional resume from sort of a job perspective rather than a creative proposal perspective. So we're just asking artists to think about how you want to present your experience adjacently to the residency program. That really helps the Public Art Advisory Committee to connect your experiences to the project proposal in a more literal way. And then support materials. So we're recommending 3 to 6 support materials: photographs, video, text samples, drawings, etc. There was one artist last year, or actually a couple of them, but one in particular, who felt more comfortable in video as a medium. So rather than doing a longhand written application for the phase 2, they did it all in video, and it was fine. It met all of the criteria. It didn't look traditional, didn't need to be traditional in any way, and we were happy to make that accommodation. So just to make that as an example to you. We do encourage you to only include the items that are listed above. And if there are lots of extraneous materials, we can't guarantee that they will go to the Public Art Advisory Committee. We get a lot of applications, so we want to make sure we're really comparing, for example, apples to apples and not apples to oranges. So if you could just focus on developing your proposal around these items, that would be amazing. Okay, so phase 1 evaluation criteria. Ability to deliver work of high artistic quality on time and on budget. That's valued at 20%. Ability to engage with the community is 10%, and connections to or familiarity with Guelph is 10%. So as I said, you may be somebody who lives in Guelph, or who has spent a certain amount of time, or have had meaningful experiences in Guelph. Those are all things we're interested in. An artist does not have to be a citizen of the City of Guelph in order to qualify for this opportunity. So all told, qualifications and experience is weighted at 40%. Then the other 60% is the quality of the preliminary project proposal. So deliver the work of high artistic quality and produce an outcome or creative process that can be shared and celebrated with the public. On that, I just want to say that we recognize that there are some artists whose practices align really clearly with the public engaging or interacting with their work. And there are other artists who have really excellent ideas, but have a tradition within their practice, which means that they are mostly working maybe independently in a studio. Both descriptions of types of practice qualify for this program. What we're inviting you to do is to think really creatively about how the public might witness or engage or experience your art through this project in ways that might be completely innovative and new to you. That might be the case, or might be just a mainstay of your practice, because you might be that kind of artist that works in community all the time. Mostly we see applications where people sort of fall in the middle of that dichotomy, but we're interested in all of it, and mostly interested in learning from you sort of what that looks like from your lens as an artist. We are really interested in inclusive community involvement, so that's weighted at 15%. And that inclusivity piece is a tricky one. So thinking about, who is the audience for your work? How are you connecting with people in different ways? How does, the broad community engage differently and potentially creatively in your practice? How does their involvement inform or sometimes even change the work that you're doing? So those are some ideas to work with. a project that will creatively animate public spaces. So this is a public art program, so we're interested in art in public spaces. Public spaces can be both indoor and outdoor. Um, and we're interested in all of that. And also 10%, and this is really important, that your project proposal is realistic and achievable. It is a limited time, it is a limited budget. So we're looking for projects. You might have a great idea that really needs different resources. So maybe we would encourage you to think about a component of that larger, bigger idea that you might want to do within the construct of this residency. And then you'll go on, that'll be sort of like foundation work or a chapter in the development of the work that you could pursue further past the residency itself. But realistic and achievable is really important. We want you to be ambitious, but we also want you to be mindful of those realities within the residency itself. So phase 2 of the application is divided out, not, a little bit differently. So qualifications and experience is 20%. Quality of proposal gets weighted a little higher at 40%, and then realization of the proposal at 40%. Supports. So shortlisted candidates will receive $400 honorarium for their second submission. As I mentioned, we will be shortlisting 4 candidates, 4 applications. Shortlisted candidates will also have a one-to-one conversation with culture staff to go over any questions or feedback or tips for how to develop out their phase 2 application. And there's loads of information at guelph.ca/air, AIR. If you'd like to go there, you can revisit that space as often as you need to. All the details are held there. Okay, so tips and tricks, just a few more slides and then we can get into our Q&A. We encourage to give yourself time to find an editing style that works for you and to take photos of your work and or create support materials. Double check for typos. That's just what we encourage everyone to do whenever they're making any kind of application, professional application. You might consider sending your proposal to a friend or a family member, somebody you trust, but who can also review what you're submitting and sort of have a little bit of distance from the submission so that maybe you can get some feedback, especially if you're stepping into the realm of public art for the first time. That might be sort of an interesting testing ground to invite family and friends to kind of think about how they might respond to the work should they experience it in the way that you're describing. And then maybe, write it if you've got the luxury of time to do that, and then set it aside for a bit and come back to it and look at it with fresh eyes. Good sort of trick of the trade. Look again at the program goals and evaluation criteria, because that is exactly what the jury will evaluate your proposal on. We want to remind you that a vision for inclusive community involvement and the outcome or creative process are the highest scored evaluation criteria. So we're really serious about wanting to connect community in really dynamic ways to your work. And while we're interested in outcome, it doesn't have to be a finished final body of work necessarily, but that there is an outcome that can be engaged. And that is a meaningful part of how you're undertaking the residency. I would also encourage you to look at artist in residence projects of past. All of them are on the guelph.ca/air web page. There's links from there to all of the past programs. And there's some great ideas in there. Certainly lots of inspiration. We're not looking for a repeat of anything that has happened in past, but sometimes that gives a good indicator of sort of like breadth and scope of proposals that have worked in past. And lots of great ideas. And don't be afraid to reach out if you have any questions for me. I'd be happy to answer them for you. We're looking at, of course, as artists, you're already creative. And I see there is a question at Maddie King. I'm just going to look at the chat for a second. For the submissions of previous work, can we include attached artist statements to the pieces? Yes, but I would encourage you to keep the statements fairly concise. I would, if possible, you can refer to them in the proposal themselves. I wouldn't say that you would have to explain at length in the body of your proposal, because I'd like you to use that space to focus on what you're proposing to do for the residency. But we, again, don't want layers and layers of additional materials. So I'd say a concise statement for each of the previous works, especially if you're reworking past work or you're looking at something that you did in past and you want to bring it forward into the residency. That would be a good connector for the Public Art Advisory Committee to sort of take that journey with you in your proposal. I think that would work. Hopefully that answers your question. So there's some questions there and some ideas of what community engagement can look like. You're very welcome. On the slide in front of you, I'm just keeping my eye on the clock because time is sort of just racing on. Maybe I don't need to go at length through the tips and tricks. You can see there, I think this is just sort of reminding you of all the things I've shared already. And again, as I say, I'll circulate the recording and I'm happy to share the slides out to everybody as well after the conversation today. Yeah, we're interested in making sure that you're presenting yourself in the best possible way. So making sure that the support materials you submit are exactly what you'd like us to see. So making sure that if there's images, that they're of a quality that serves the work well, that if you have additional support materials actually Maddie's question was perfectly timed because it's that kind of thing where we want that sort of nuanced understanding of your work. And just, lean into your knowledge base, your own authenticity, your own excitement for the project, and that will always translate in a powerful way to the jury. Here's a great tip. So when you're preparing all of the pieces of your application, if you could make sure that the files are named consistently. So we've given an example here, just using my own name. It doesn't have to look exactly like this, but what we're recommending is that you have a consistent way of identifying each of your files. That way we don't lose anything just in the administrative process. And it's easier for us to sort of manage the back end of the process and that all of your parts sort of are looked at consistently and, everything stays together. That helps us enormously. Every now and again, we get files that are just the files that come off of the camera or your phone. And it's hard for us to piece those back together. So a little bit of housekeeping in the file department would be great. Would strengthen the submission. Okay. I would love to answer any questions that you may be having, and I encourage you to either just ask them. You can put up your hand if you have a question that you want me to just answer for you, or you can use the chat. The floor is yours.
Hi, Dawn. I had a question about the public space. Would you consider an online space a public space?
Definitely. We didn't talk a lot about this actually in the slide presentation, but it's a great question. We are interested in projects that live digitally. That's definitely a public space. The challenge, among the challenges are how to reach a community of what is that community? Who are the community that you're reaching in that space? Possibly you have an existing network that you would lean into. That's a possibility. Additionally, reaching out to community organizations or other sort of groups that gather and can be contacted as a group might be helpful to find out sort of how they gather digitally or virtually. There's so many different platforms as well. And sort of what I would be interested in from a project proposal is how that digital space is unique to gathering in other public spaces. Because I think, there's a ton of work for us collectively to do in the culture community around reaching people digitally. And then also making sure that that digital experience is valuable in the ways that we think about other types of gathering. And that could be an accessibility question. Like maybe some folks just don't feel comfortable coming out and painting in a big group, or, maybe there are some folks who are not joiners, as I say. and they feel uncomfortable. They want to witness, maybe they want to be silent witnesses, but they might be more comfortable in, connecting and from the comfort of their own personal space. That could be like a powerful invitation to some folks who are not elsewise in this sort of, dare I say, post-pandemic era, not elsewise able to kind of connect in that way, that some of those opportunities to gather digitally are not there anymore because we're sort of mostly in person now and trying to still hold on to that sort of hybrid experience. But I'd like to know, what does that mean for the development of the work? Who is the community that you're visioning would gather digitally? How to reach those folks? How to ensure that opportunity is meaningful both to you as the artist and also to the community you're hoping to come together and engage. Yeah,
Oh, sorry, I had a second question.
yeah,
Um, um, the artist in residence program is run by the city through the museum.
yes.
Uh, is there any relationship with the Guelph Arts Council or?
I'm so yes, a small city. We're very, from a culture lens, we're very intersectional, is what I would suggest. The Guelph Arts Council is not like a department of the city traditionally, although is, I would say, tethered to the city in unique ways. It's interesting because museums and culture, we sometimes say this, sort of got married in the middle of the pandemic. I thought it was a great union, actually. The fact that we were always, that we were often working in parallel ways and often directly in collaboration. It made sense to bring those two essential parts together in a more formal way. And as museums and culture, on behalf of the City of Guelph, we are also working with colleague organizations. And I would say Guelph Arts Council is a colleague organization in this work. Yeah,
Thanks, Dawn.
no problem. Any other questions? I see one in the chat. Could the final body of work be immersive and partially involved depend on the public community? So yes, I'm not entirely sure what you vision, Maddie, as immersive. Um, I gather I'm trying to intuit from your question that partially involved, depend on the public, might mean that they would have a role in creating, in the actual creation of the work itself. So maybe they're contributing directly, like that they are modifying the work as they experience it, or their engagement of it changes the work in some kind of meaningful way. I
Yeah.
think that, if I'm interpreting that correctly.
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's very exciting. The idea of that. And in terms of immersion, could you, without giving your whole proposal away, could you share a little bit about what that what you see as immersive? Because I think it's a broad range.
True. Yeah, I'm thinking that I'm gonna create something and then involve the public in finishing that something.
Yeah,
Yeah? Okay. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And there's an open-endedness to that I appreciate can maybe be a little bit hard to describe in a proposal, right? Because
Yeah.
your vision, you're going basically what you're doing is creating a process and starting an artwork
Yeah.
without sort of predicting or predetermining what the conclusion of that journey will be, right?
Yeah.
So maybe what you could do in your proposal is think about possible outcomes when community is engaged. Who are the community you're visioning? Sometimes what we see in proposals is that artists will make very broad statements about community. They'll say, sometimes it's for fear of, I think, um, restricting access or sounding like you want a really focused sort of engagement. But the reality is being clear in the process as to who you are hoping to engage in the work, I
Yeah.
think actually serves the proposal well and serves the work well. Um, because you'll be working in a public space by whatever description is important to you, um, I think naturally you will attract other folks that maybe are not at the center of your vision, and those folks will be welcome as well. So, you know, for example, if you are someone who's really interested in a particular community experience, and that could be, for example, one that is, I'm just going to pull something out of my mind. Like, say you're particularly interested in sound, maybe you're a sound artist, and um, you know that the community is made up of a diverse group of people, some of whom are fully hearing and can engage the work in a sort of full hearing capacity. There are lots of other folks who have hearing loss or maybe are members of the deaf culture community and wouldn't experience the work in the same way. And maybe that's interesting to you. And so in your proposal, you might say, I recognize that there is a like a broad scope of engagement that has potential to really um, change my work in powerful ways. And so I'm
Yeah.
interested in talking with, you know, and you can identify different community groups that might be, you know, particularly vibrant or have a strong connection to your work. It doesn't mean
Mhm.
that you're not interested in other community members engaging, but that gives us a good indication, especially with work that is process based, like where who you think would have an important voice or an important contribution to make to the
Okay.
process.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Any other questions? Keeping my eye on the chat. While you're pondering, I'm going to flip the slide and just put my contact information back on the screen. If you're anything like me, I come out of moments like this and I think, oh, that's the question I should have asked. Please don't hesitate to ask that question after the formal discussion, the informal conversation we're having now. If you prefer a one-to-one engagement, I'd be very happy to hear from you, and I'd be very keen to, you know, make sure that you get your questions answered. And hopefully the lack of question means you've got your questions answered already, possibly. I'm happy to hang out here for the next little bit.
Um, I'll ask another question,
Yep.
if you don't mind.
Okay.
So the phase one initial proposal it would be different than if you were invited to participate in phase two, would be a more fleshed out kind of
That's
version.
right.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
phase one is really an expression of interest in some broad strokes of your proposal.
Mhm.
Um, what we want to know is sort of we want to know what direction you're moving in, what medium or media you're working in, who are the community that you're hoping to engage with. You don't have to have finite relationships established in phase one. It's just sort of who you see as being sort of the dynamic community partners in your work. I would say too that, you know, through the residency, one of the things that the city culture team does is work really closely with the artist on making those connections. So you might have a deep desire or a vision for working with a um, particular sector of the community, but you might not have a lot of relationships there as yet. The residency can also be a space where you build relationships. So
Mhm.
we can help to connect some of those dots or build some bridges. Um, you might be thinking about, for example, like a youth community. You might have some connections there. You could, for example, say, well, I recognize that there are youth groups who gather in multiple spaces around the city. You could be looking at schools and school boards. You know, keep in mind that the residency proper happens through the summer months, and it can be a challenge for, say, like a school-based community when they're off season, they're mostly on a school break in the summertime to connect in important ways in the work. So just something to think about. Um, like the time frame of the residency and how it informs who you might work with. But again, you don't have to have that squared away finitely in phase one. We're really looking at sort of the big idea. We're looking at who you are as an artist, what experiences you've had that strengthen the idea you're proposing, and then just sort of initial kind of feasibility of the proposal that you're hoping to develop in phase two. And so you're looking a little bit at budget, you're looking a little bit at other logistics. I'm just going to take a sip of my coffee here. Pardon me. Yeah, so it's not meant to be an exhausting process. It's really meant to be sort of enough information that you feel like you've communicated who you are and what you're proposing to do in a good way. And then phase two becomes a much more developed proposal, which will require more time of the artist, which is why we recognize that we need to award some support, provide some resources to artists who are in phase two. Again, there's a one-to-one opportunity there. So by then you'll have very specific questions that you're thinking about and needing answers to. And we'll work with you one-to-one to help provide some of that content and context for you to, make a good second proposal.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, we only have 5 minutes left. Trusting that you've copied down the contact details there. And again, I would encourage you to go to guelph.ca/AIR for just all of the details about the residency process. I will also make sure that this recording gets shared out to everybody who registered to join us today. We were anticipating about 19 folks to attend, and we've got a smaller group than that, which I'm not going to interpret what that means. It could just be life getting in the way, and I completely respect that, but I will make sure it gets out to everybody who registered for the conversation. And again, if you have any questions that didn't get answered or that you hadn't thought of in the space of this dialogue, you can reach out to me directly and I will be very happy to answer those questions as they come up. And I do hope everybody on this call makes a submission. It'd be great to see what you're thinking about and how you might creatively engage the community this summer. So I'll stay here for the next 5 minutes or so. Well, you're welcome. And if anyone is lingering, you can until 7. And you're free to go otherwise. Thanks, everyone.
Sorry, can I just ask one more question?
Yes, definitely.
The submission would be electronic.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a link.
Okay.
On the main page for the program, and it's a digital submission form.
Perfect.
Yeah. So you just upload everything. Yep.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Dawn.
Oh, you're so
Bye.
welcome.
Nice to see you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Nice to see you too. Take care.